Who you gonna call? That single line echoed through the 1980s like a battle cry. But Ghostbusters wasn't just a comedy about guys chasing ghosts. It was chaos disguised as charm. Behind the proton packs were rewrites on the fly, budget battles, and real fear that the movie would collapse. What audiences laughed at on screen often came from disasters off-set. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 20 weird facts about Ghostbusters, 1984. From dangerous stunts to supernatural coincidences, you'll see the madness no one talks about. And wait until you hear the bonus fact. It's the most shocking of all. Let's dive in. The movie was almost set in space. Ghostbusters wasn't supposed to take place in New York. Dan Aykroyd's original script had proton packs blasting through time and space, fighting interdimensional specters across multiple realities. The budget for that version? A mind-melting $200 million, completely impossible for the 1980s. Columbia Pictures panicked, forcing a total rewrite. What began as science fiction chaos transformed into a grounded, New York-based comedy. Not outer space, but urban grit. Not cosmic monsters, but Stay Puft Marshmallow Man towering over Manhattan. That pivot saved the film. Instead of a bloated disaster, it became a cultural touchstone. Sometimes limitations don't destroy art. They crystallize it. And in this case, a studio rejection gave us the iconic New York setting that made Ghostbusters feel authentic, familiar, and hilariously relatable. Fans never realized they were watching a compromise that birthed a classic. Bill Murray wasn't supposed to star. Casting chaos defined Ghostbusters. Dan Aykroyd had written the script for himself, John Belushi and Eddie Murphy. Belushi tragically died before production, and Murphy turned down the role of Winston to do Beverly Hills Cop. Enter Bill Murray, reluctantly. Murray didn't sign a contract. He only gave a vague verbal agreement. The studio was terrified he wouldn't show up on day one. But he did, sauntering onto set with that sly grin and ad-libbing lines that rewrote scenes in real time. Not Eddie Murphy's wisecracks, but Murray's sly detachment. Not Belushi's mania, but deadpan sarcasm. His unpredictability could have wrecked the film, but instead, it electrified every frame. What audiences didn't know was that Murray's very presence was a gamble, one that turned Ghostbusters into comedy gold. Slimer was a tribute to John Belushi. That gluttonous green ghost wasn't just comic relief, it was a ghostly homage. Dan Aykroyd, mourning his friend John Belushi, insisted the effects team base Slimer's behavior on Belushi's Animal House character, Bluto. The endless eating, the chaotic energy, the wild expressions, they were all Belushi. But building Slimer was chaos. The practical puppet required a team of operators inside, drenched in sweat, trying to keep its slime-coated movements funny but functional. It wasn't high-tech CGI, but wires, foam, and gallons of disgusting goop. Not just a monster, but a memorial. Every scene with Slimer is haunted by the ghost of Belushi himself. For fans, it was a gag. For Aykroyd, it was a farewell. The laughter came with a hidden ache, making Slimer one of the strangest, most emotional Easter eggs in comedy history. The marshmallow finale nearly killed the crew. The Stay Puft. Marshmallow Man wasn't CGI. It was a 120-pound suit filled with heat and misery. Actor Bill Bryan staggered inside layers of foam and rubber, sweating through long takes under burning studio lights. Special effects crews built miniature cityscapes for him to stomp through, but one stunt went horribly wrong. When Stay Puft exploded into a marshmallow shower, the substance wasn't fluffy sugar. It was industrial shaving cream. Nearly 50 pounds of it dropped at once. Crew members were knocked to the floor, buried under foamy sludge. Not sweet marshmallow, but suffocating chemical chaos. What looked like comedy bliss was a dangerous hazard that could have crushed Brian or drowned a cameraman. Watching Stay Puft collapse on screen, audiences never realized they were seeing one of the riskiest practical gags of the decade. New York City became a nightmare set. Shooting on location in New York gave Ghostbusters its authenticity. But it was brutal. Crowds mobbed the actors, ruining takes. Police constantly intervened as the crew blocked traffic on Fifth Avenue. During the iconic ghost chase outside Rockefeller Center, extras weren't extras at all. They were real New Yorkers, angry and confused. Production permits barely kept the shoot legal. Not controlled Hollywood sets, but wild urban chaos. At one point, an officer nearly shut the film down for disrupting emergency lanes. Even more surreal, actual city workers thought the Ghostbusters Ecto-1 car was a real emergency vehicle, pulling it aside to give traffic clearance. The film fed off this chaos, capturing the energy of a city that never behaved. What audiences thought was crafted spectacle was, in reality, Guerrilla filmmaking on the edge of collapse. Sigourney Weaver won her role by barking like a dog. Sigourney Weaver wasn't the studio's first pick for Dana Barrett. Executives thought she was too serious after Alien. But during her audition, Weaver shocked everyone. She climbed onto a chair and started snarling, growling, and barking like Zool possessed Dana. The casting team froze. Not polished lines, but primal chaos. Not a safe audition, but a fearless possession. That bold move landed her the role instantly. Weaver later admitted she knew the film needed someone willing to look ridiculous, and her dog impression gamble proved she understood the balance of horror and comedy. What audiences didn't realize is that Dana Barrett wasn't just cast on talent, she was cast on sheer audacity. Without Weaver's wild, rule-breaking audition, the Zool, possession might never have been so terrifying, or so funny. The Ecto-1 was a breakdown machine. The Ghostbusters car, the Ecto-1, looked like a supernatural powerhouse on screen. In reality, it was a 1959 Cadillac Miller Meteor ambulance barely held together. Mechanics struggled daily just to keep it running. The engine coughed, the suspension groaned, and the vehicle frequently died mid-scene, leaving the actors pushing it through New York streets in full costume. Not unstoppable ghost-chasing tech, but a junker on life support. Crew members often begged for backup vehicles, but the budget allowed only one. Every time the Ecto-1 rolled into a shot without stalling was a miracle. Ironically, this failing car became one of cinema's most iconic vehicles. What fans saw as sleek paranormal tech was, in truth, a temperamental clunker that nearly sabotaged the production at every turn. Rick Moranis saved the party scene with improve. Rick Moranis' character Louis Tully wasn't just funny, he was practically unscripted. In the infamous party scene where Louis rambles about guests' tax deductions, none of that dialogue was in the script. Moranis invented the monologue in real time, naming fake guests and absurd financial details while wandering through the crowd. The extras were genuinely confused, unsure if they should laugh or keep acting. Not rehearsed lines, but raw improv brilliance. Not controlled chaos, but comedic lightning. Director Ivan Reitman loved it so much he refused to cut a second. That improvised rant turned Louis Tully from a background nerd into a fan favorite. What audiences thought was scripted wit was, in reality, a comedian unleashed, capturing one of the purest laughs in the entire film. The Library Ghost was a real nightmare to create. The film opens with the unforgettable library ghost, terrifying, spectral, and explosive. But creating that scene nearly broke the effects team. They built an elaborate puppet with glowing eyes, controlled by multiple operators. Early tests looked laughable, like a balloon deflating in slow motion. Not horror, but accidental comedy. After weeks of failure, the crew combined multiple effects, puppet, rod controls, smoke machines, and hand-painted animation to build the transformation from gentle librarian to demonic terror. The sequence cost nearly $300,000, astronomical for a single scare. What audiences didn't know was that this one scene consumed more money and manpower than some entire indie films of the 1980s. But it worked. The Library Ghost became a blueprint for mixing practical and visual effects in modern blockbusters. The cast feared they were making a flop. Behind the laughter was constant doubt. Bill Murray famously told friends the film was going to be the world's first $200 million disaster. Dan Aykroyd worried audiences wouldn't understand the mix of supernatural horror and slapstick comedy. Even studio executives feared it was too weird. To market, not confident blockbuster, but fragile gamble. During test screenings, however, audiences erupted with laughter and cheers, flipping the narrative overnight. The cast couldn't believe it. What they thought was doomed chaos became instant electricity. The moment the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man appeared on screen, viewers howled, and Columbia Pictures realized they had lightning in a bottle. Go ahead and like and subscribe, because just like Ghostbusters, this story only gets wilder from here. The next 10 facts will blow your mind even more. 11. Dan Aykroyd believed in real ghosts. For Aykroyd, Ghostbusters wasn't just entertainment, it was family tradition. His great-grandfather had been a noted spiritualist who conducted seances, and Aykroyd himself collected books on paranormal research. When he wrote the script, he laced it with authentic ghost-hunting jargon like ectoplasm and psychokinetic energy. Not random science fiction, but borrowed lore from genuine occult writings. His obsession made the script both funnier and eerier, because the comedy always brushed against a strange realism. Crew members joked that the film felt cursed, because Aykroyd insisted on incorporating real supernatural practices. What audiences didn't know was that the heart of Ghostbusters was not parody. It was belief. Aykroyd wasn't mocking ghost hunters. He was honoring them. That sincerity is why the jokes still land. They're tethered to a world he truly thought existed. The firehouse is half real, half fake. The Ghostbusters firehouse headquarters is iconic, but it's really two buildings. The exterior shots were filmed at a functioning firehouse in New York's Tribeca district. Inside, however, was a completely different location, a Los Angeles firehouse with a much larger floor plan for filming. Not one building, but two stitched together. This duality caused chaos in continuity. Props and costumes had to be carefully tracked so nothing shifted between coasts. Even worse, the New York firehouse had active firefighters, so the crew had to pause whenever trucks went on real emergencies. What audiences thought was a single unified set was, in truth, a bi-coastal patchwork. The illusion worked so well that many fans still visit the New York location expecting to find the iconic interior. Instead, they're peering into a working station that never housed proton packs. Studio executives wanted Stay Puft removed. Columbia Pictures executives were nervous about the giant marshmallow finale. They thought the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man was too silly, too absurd, and risked turning the climax into parody. They begged director Ivan Reitman to cut it, suggesting a more traditional monster. Reitman refused. He argued that the entire film built toward absurdity, and a giant mascot destroying Manhattan was both terrifying and hilarious. Not conventional menace, but surreal disaster. He won the fight, but the pressure was enormous. If the gag failed, the whole film would collapse. Instead, Stay Puft became the most iconic image of the movie. What audiences didn't know was that their favorite finale was nearly erased by nervous executives. Sometimes the riskiest idea is the one that makes cinematic history. Sound designers used animal noises for ghosts. Those eerie howls and roars weren't generated by computers. The sound design team raided a library of animal noises, elephants, camels, even angry camels mixed with distorted whale calls to create ghostly voices. The sounds were slowed, reversed, and layered until they felt both human and inhuman. Not digital trickery, but primal recordings bent into horror. For Slimer, they blended pig grunts with a belch. For Zool, they added lion growls under Sigourney Weaver's performance. The result was unsettling because it carried real-world weight. What audiences didn't know was that they were hearing the ghost of the animal kingdom stitched into supernatural form. The practical creativity behind those sounds proved that horror doesn't need expensive tech, just raw imagination and a willingness to distort the familiar into something monstrous. Filming the roof battle nearly blew the budget. The climactic rooftop showdown with Gozer wasn't just visually spectacular, it was financially devastating. The massive set was built on a soundstage in Los Angeles, complete with stone temples, lightning rigs, and breakaway walls. Special effects teams layered matte paintings, miniature explosions, and live-action pyrotechnics. Every mistake cost thousands. One lightning gag overloaded circuits, plunging the entire stage into darkness for hours. Not seamless Hollywood magic, but a logistical nightmare. Columbia executives panicked as the budget ballooned. Yet the sequence ended up defining the film, its mix of practical sets and optical tricks creating a timeless spectacle. What audiences didn't know was that this finale nearly bankrupted the production, but it also delivered the grandeur that made Ghostbusters more than just a comedy. 16. The theme song was written in a panic ray. Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters theme wasn't carefully planned. It was a rush job. He was given only a few days to write something catchy after several other musicians failed. While watching late-night TV, Parker saw a commercial for a plumbing service. Inspired by its cheesy jingle, he imagined ghostbusting as a service business and penned the iconic hook, "Who you gonna call?" Not polished studio genius, but a lightning bolt improvisation. The song was recorded almost as quickly as it was written, yet it became a chart-topping anthem. Ironically, Parker was later sued by Huey Lewis, who claimed the riff copied "I Want a New Drug." What audiences didn't know was that the most famous part of the film's legacy, the music, was born out of last-minute panic and pure luck. Ernie Hudson's role was gutted by rewrites. Ernie. Hudson expected Winston Zeddemore to be a fully developed Ghostbuster. In early drafts, Winston was introduced on page 15 as a tough military veteran with deep backstory. But rewrites slashed his role dramatically. He didn't appear until halfway through the film, and much of his dialogue was given to Bill Murray. Not equal teammate, but sidelined support. Hudson later admitted he was devastated by the changes, though he remained grateful for the role. His frustration highlights Hollywood's brutal hierarchies. Star power often dictates character depth. What audiences didn't realize was that Winston was meant to be the film's grounding presence, a no-nonsense counterbalance to the eccentric scientists. Instead, he became underutilized, though still beloved. Fans today still debate how different Ghostbusters might have felt if Winston had received his full original arc. Real parapsychologists protested the film. When Ghostbusters premiered, some parapsychologists were furious. They believed the movie mocked their field, turning genuine paranormal research into slapstick comedy. Several even wrote angry letters to Columbia Pictures, accusing the film of ridiculing their life's work. Not harmless fun, but professional insult. Ironically, the film's popularity gave ghost hunting new visibility. After its release, membership in paranormal societies spiked, and ghost tours across America flourished. What was meant as satire inadvertently fueled public fascination with the supernatural. The controversy faded as fans embraced the comedy, but the initial backlash showed just how seriously some groups took the subject. What audiences didn't know was that their laughter carried unintended consequences, sparking debates about science, spirituality, and pop culture's power to shape belief. The film was almost rated R. Despite its playful tone, Ghostbusters flirted with a restrictive R rating. The MPAA was alarmed by the mix of frightening imagery, strong language, and suggestive jokes. Several ghost scenes, including Zool's possession of Dana, were flagged as too intense. Not kid-friendly fun, but borderline horror. Ivan Reitman fought hard, trimming just enough to secure a PG rating. Ironically, this was before the PG-13 category existed, so Ghostbusters landed in a strange middle ground. Too edgy for kids, too silly for adults. That balance made it irresistible. What audiences didn't know was that the film teetered on the edge of censorship. If it had been rated R, its audience would have shrunk dramatically, and its cultural explosion might never have happened. Test screenings changed the ending. In early cuts, the film ended with the Ghostbusters walking away quietly from the wreckage, exhausted and beaten down. Test audiences hated it. They wanted triumph, not melancholy. Columbia demanded a new ending. The team victorious, cheered by crowds, with Stay Puft's melted remains raining down. Not weary heroes, but celebrated icons. The reshoot cost millions, but paid off instantly. Audiences left theaters energized, not deflated. What viewers didn't realize was that the ending they loved was the result of last-minute studio intervention. For once, executive meddling saved the day. Instead of fading into cult obscurity, Ghostbusters became an instant blockbuster with one of the most rousing finales in comedy history.